Welcome to the Passive Income Podcast. I am your host, Dividend Dave. Please be sure to click that subscribe button below and join the Passive Income Posse. And on today's episode, a very special guest, very new on in the Dividend Twitter community. You can find him on Twitter at Retire with Ryan, but you do know him from his YouTube channel, over 14,000 subscribers on YouTube. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Ryan, and you can just give yourself an introduction.
Sure. Well, Dave, thank you so much for having me on this morning. It's definitely an honor. And like you said, I'm very new to the FinTwit, the DivTwit community, but I've been around the block for a couple of years on YouTube, which is where most of the action is for me. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ryan Williams, and I would imagine, like many of you out there, I am a fanatic for dividends. I am a dividend stock investor, and I've got that big dividend energy. Shout out JJ Buckner and the dividend tracker. But yeah, I mean, like many of you guys, I'm just a dividend stock investor living here in Las Vegas and just trying to, build those dividends and reach financial freedom as quick as possible. That's the goal.
Nice. I actually purposely put my Las Vegas hoodie on this morning.
That's awesome. Have you been here, or when was the last time you were in Vegas?
I've only been to Vegas once, and I was trying to remember this morning what year that was. It might have been 10 years ago, 2012, maybe 2013,
Okay.
maybe 2014, 8 to 10 years ago. I was only ever there once, yeah.
Well,
But
it sounds like you're definitely overdue.
yeah, it's obviously it's a fun city.
Yeah. No, I just moved here. About 3 months ago now. I'm originally from Northern California and just decided to get out of Dodge. And I pretty much lived up there my whole life. And so it's been nice moving out here, seeing something different. And, Vegas obviously has its certain image, what people know about it, but it's been a really great place to live so far. And I'm so happy to be here.
Cool. So like I said, before we started recording and we were just chatting a little bit, I was binge watching a few of your videos this morning. And actually, our portfolios look kind of similar, except, I have the Canadian counterparts to a lot of what you own in the US. So yeah, I was watching the one where you would hit a all-time monthly high of $217. So that's obviously a great milestone. Another one I watched, you had hit an average of 150. It looked like that one might have been a month or two old. So
Yeah.
yeah, you're definitely hitting some great milestones, and you've got the right mindset as well. Obviously, I've only been in it 2-3 years, and you're going to grow that over time. And I love some of those trackers where you show this is where I'm going to be in 10 years, 20 years, even 30 years, right? So those
Yeah.
are obviously exciting to see.
You know, Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point too, like those dividend income calculators that can kind of forecast, how much income you'll be generating and maybe what your portfolio might look like 10, 20, 30 years down the road. I know for me, especially when I, first got into this stuff, seriously got into dividend investing, a few years ago now, it was those calculators that I guess really got me excited because, when you first start out, I just think for many
Sorry about
people.
that. I told you he might bark.
Oh, no worries. I mean, like I said, I don't blame him getting riled up about these dividends.
Yeah, he is. He is. He's like, what?
Yeah, but
He just wants to
no,
invest in Purina. That's it.
yeah, no, but it was those calculators that really like sealed the deal for me, I think, because it's hard to get excited about something like dividend investing where, it's going to take at least 5, 10, 15 years to really start seeing some good results, right? And bring
Right.
in some like serious cash flow. And so it's hard for someone, I think, to get on board for this style of investing, knowing that it's going to take so long to really see results.
Yeah,
And it was
definitely.
those
And
calculators that forecasted it for me. Like if you just stay consistent and have some patience, a few years down the road, really sooner than you might think, it's going to pay off, and it certainly has so far. I mean, like you said, just last month in November, it was my first month hitting over $200 in dividend income. Which there's plenty of people out there who are making more on their dividends. There's
sure.
plenty of people there who are making less, but just as far as my personal journey, it was huge. And it's like,
Yeah.
$200, it's not nothing. That could pay for some real life bills, if I
Yep.
wanted it to. So, it's only been a couple years too. So it's like, like I said, it can take off quicker than you think.
Yeah, exactly. At the start of one of those videos, you were showing like, oh, $1, $2, $3 doesn't sound like much, but that snowball effect starts to happen within, like you said, 3, 4, 5 years. You start seeing all of a sudden that becomes $100 or $200, and you're like, hey, wow, now I'm onto something. It's tough to reinvest at $2 or $3, but it's easy to reinvest $200 or $300, right? And start keep that snowball growing.
Yeah. And to that point, like it got to a point in the portfolio where like when you're making that $1, $2, $5 a month or whatever with each payment, it makes sense, I think, to drip to automatically reinvest, right? But it gets to a
Yep.
point, I think for many investors, and let me know what you think about this too, Dave. But I think it makes sense for when you get to a certain point to turn off that drip and manually reallocate those incoming dividends elsewhere, put those into, basically hand pick where you want to reinvest those funds. Do you like how do you do it? Do you automatically drip or do you manually, decide where you're going to put the dividends?
So I'm forced to manually decide where to reinvest simply because the platform I use does not offer the DRIP, which is dividend
Oh,
reinvestment plan. For those of you who may not be familiar, so every month I do reinvest my dividends, but I'm forced to manually do it, and I'm 110% okay with that because, like you said, you kind of are then able to more pick and choose which ones you want. And um, this past year, with we're more or less have been in a bear market. I've been really able to focus on dollar cost averaging down on every one that I'm low on. I'm like, okay, well, I'm down on this one. I'm going to dollar cost average down on it, and the ones that I'm up on, I'm just going to let them ride and
yeah.
let those dividends keep rolling in monthly or quarterly, right?
Hmm. How long have you been investing? Like, how did you first start getting into dividend investing? And
Well, that's a very long story.
I'm sure you've told this story numerous times, but it's always interesting to hear like kind of, every investor's origin story.
Yeah, so that is a long story that I'm not going to repeat the entire story here. For those of you who are interested in listening, I was actually a guest on Green Candle IT podcast, and my introduction of myself was nearly 10 minutes long. So I don't want to take up your time talking about my 10 minutes of mistakes over the last 30 years. Uh, but to give you more of a brief answer, my time frame is pretty similar to yours. Is where I got very seriously into just the dividends over the last, say 2 to 3 years, and
Mhm.
just focusing on growing those solid dividend paying companies. That's the
Okay.
short answer. For those of you who want the long answer, head over to Green Candle IT and listen to my full 10 minutes of all the mistakes I've made in the last 30 years.
So you were basically prior to that, you were investing, you just chose a different strategy and then somehow you stumbled into dividend stocks.
Yeah, so I've known the dividend strategy for a long time, and even I guess in the mid 2000s, I was buying some dividend paying stocks, and then of course life happens and you need money, so end up selling things off, and then I got married, and she didn't really understand. She saw those $1 and $2 and $3 at the start. She didn't see the $300 a few years down the road. She saw, oh, but you're investing $300 to get that $2. I could use that $300 to pay bills and buy groceries and whatnot, right?
Hmm.
So, um, again, the end of that story is we're now divorced, and I, about 2 or 3 years ago. So
Yeah.
odd timing there, right?
Yeah, man.
That
So
that's
so
when I
maybe
decided, okay, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, so basically just when her and I split up, that's when I was like, okay, now I can really focus on growing my dividend portfolio and getting to that point where, I'm a lot older too. I'm going to be 50 next spring, so it's like I really need to push this for 10 years because I'd like to retire at say 60, not 70, right? So,
Hmm.
yeah, so I'm just really hoping that in 10 years I can really, pile enough away that that I have a nice little nest egg, so to speak.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of people think just about money in general, maybe how like your ex-wife does. They don't. It's something to for many people, it's something to spend today that you can potentially spend today. But I think a lot of us dividend investors look at our portfolios and look at making these contributions as, maybe sacrificing some things today for the betterment of tomorrow. And I think
Yeah.
when, not to get too deep into the philosophical aspect of investing here, but like you think about a lot of things that I guess improve your life and make it better. The things that are worthwhile, they often, there's often some sort of sacrifice attached to it. Like I often compare it to, I know I don't look at, but outside of dividend investing, I'm big into weightlifting and fitness and stuff like that. There's a lot of symmetry there because it doesn't feel good going to the gym. It's hard to get on the treadmill every morning and walk or go and get under the bench press and lift heavy weights or what have you. But my goodness, if you're consistent with something like that, it's going to pay off
Yeah.
down the road. And the same is most definitely true with dividend investing. And so, like I said earlier, it's hard to get people excited about something like this that is going to take that there's such a like delayed gratification component to it. But my goodness, you do it for a couple years, it is certainly worth it. And even if you're not retired after 2, 3, 5 years, it's like you might be making an extra couple $100 a month for not having to lift a finger. And like I would take that, I would take that trade any day.
I love when companies pay me to not work for them.
I know. I know. And, kind of similarly too, I was watching a YouTube video yesterday or a couple days ago, kind of semi-related, but they were talking about 401ks and talking about, do you guys have 401ks in Canada by chance? Or
I
is
know we
some sort
have,
of,
yeah, we have other investment vehicles. So one is called a TFSA, which is a tax-free savings account, which really should be called a tax-free investment account because you can invest, directly into the stock market. That's how I do it right now because I'm not near the maximum contributions yet. We have RRSPs, which are registered retirement savings plans, and again, you can invest uh, directly into the stock market with those as well. And then you can invest with a personal account. So there's several different ways. There's also then the just CPP and OAS, which is Canada Pension Plan that you pay into every job you've ever worked in your life, and OAS is
okay.
Old Age Security. The
Okay.
problem with those two, you get those when you turn 65, like no matter what. The problem with those two is they don't pay you enough to live off of. So you need to have more money by the time you're 65, right?
Yeah. It's kind of the
Those are
same
really
too. Like
supposed to be like your
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say those 2 are supposed to be like your bonus checks, I guess, each month. You're supposed to have by the time you're 65, you're supposed to have enough on your own to live off of and I guess use those as sort of your disposable income almost. But there's so many people trying to live off of just those 2 things, which you can't make ends meet, not at all.
hmm It sounds like the Canada pension plan is, I think is what you called it. It sounds like our equivalent might be something like Social Security, right? Like something that you have to opt into. You have to set aside a certain amount of your paycheck to go towards. But so I was going to ask though, so with your guys' retirement accounts up there that maybe you have through work or whatever, do employers do matching? So if you contribute a certain amount, will some employers match that amount? Like if you set aside a couple $100 a month to put into your Canadian retirement account, do some employers match that and also contribute that same amount?
Yeah, some employers have, like my work, I'm lucky enough to have what's called a group RRSP. So yes, every paycheck I contribute, I think it's 3%, and the company matches that 3%. It might be 3.5%. And so yeah, there is also that, but not every company has that type of pension plan. Actually,
Yeah.
it's becoming few and far between.
Okay. It's very similar here in the United States, but with our 401ks, like that's our equivalent, right? But what I was going to say, so I was watching this video yesterday or 2 days ago, and they were talking about these matches, where these employers will match the same amount of contribution that you make. And I was thinking about it, and it's like, that is seriously can make such an impact because it's literally your employer giving you money to like helping you retire earlier. So it's like if you have the if you have that luxury and your employer does that, it's like, man, you should definitely take advantage of it. And I'm sure there's so many people both here in the States and up in your neck of the woods that are not.
Yeah, no, agreed. I did want to go back and just make one point about your comment about the gym, because
Yeah.
I was thinking that is a great comparison. You go to the gym on day 1 and you work out for an hour, and you're not going to be ripped and buff after 1 hour workout on day one, right? And it's the exact same thing in investing and dividend investing. You're not going to have a huge portfolio after 1 month. You just have to keep
Mhm.
grinding, keep going at it, keep going back to that gym every single day, or whatever it is. If you work out, say 3, 4 times a week, and dividend investing is the exact same thing. Every paycheck, you're putting 50, 100, 150, $200, whatever you can afford out of your paycheck to pay yourself first and get those dividends, right? Buy that
Mhm.
passive income.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was just my own little rant, I guess, on getting in, right? You just got to
No,
start, get involved.
it's totally true. And nowadays it's like it's almost like there's no excuse not to because there's so much information out there. Now easier, more easy than ever to get started and do it for yourself and learn about it. But still,
Yeah.
it's like it's a hard sell because people don't want to part ways with their money and put it into this thing that they're, probably not going to be able to utilize for decades. So, which I get, but
And so many
at the
people
same
are unfamiliar.
yeah, but at the same time, it's something that everyone has to do, right? Because just going back to that classic Warren Buffett quote, if you don't find a way to make money in your sleep, you're literally going to work until you die. And so everyone has to invest and set aside for the future. And I don't know, I just can't think of a better way to do it than this right here. For most people, it's pretty easy. Well, it can be pretty easy. It can be very hands off and very automated. So, it's totally worth it.
Yeah, a couple of great points there. I don't want to have to work until I die. That's for sure. I'd like to, like I said, retire in say 10 years is sort of my goal. Um, and yeah, nowadays it is easy. We all have phones with apps on our phone. You can do all your banking, you can do all your investing right on your phone, which, we didn't have that 30 years ago. And, even 15 years ago, before apps were more prevalent, you could suddenly start doing things online banking and investing through your bank account. 15, 20 years ago, when that became sort of more prevalent, the unfortunate thing there was with the banking system, the commissions were extremely high, and they still are today extremely high. But now we have these apps on our phone where you have either free commission, like zero commission, or extremely low fees, right? So the barrier to entry has lowered greatly in the last just 10 years. And the information is there now, right? It's just people have to go and find the information.
Yeah, which I guess is where we come in, right? We just got to keep putting that information out there.
Yeah, so let's actually get into talking about some of the different sectors. Like I said, I was watching some of your videos this morning. You have quite the diversified portfolio, and um, REITs is one of my favorite sectors. I own several REITs, and I saw that you own Realty Income, and I was saying to just a guest that I was talking to yesterday or a couple days ago that I think every single American guest I've had on the Passive Income podcast has held ticker symbol O Realty Income. So I don't know, anything you want to add to about Realty Income or REITs in general?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely second your sentiment there. REITs are becoming one of my favorite sectors. Unfortunately, they're taxed a little bit higher here in the United States, but there's some really great real estate investment trusts out there, and the good ones are very secure businesses like Realty Income, which has a decently high dividend yield, right? Like somewhere in the mid fours. Substantial dividend growth history. They're a dividend aristocrat, 25 years. And if you look at their roster of tenants and just their portfolio as a whole, it's a pretty well diversified portfolio. And it doesn't appear to be that most of their assets are at risk of like becoming falling out of favor, I guess is a good way to put it. So it just seems like
Right.
one of the good old reliable REITs to own. And I would go so far as to say it's like, well, it's probably undoubtedly the most popular real estate investment trust, wouldn't you say? Like if someone's going to have one REIT in their portfolio, chances are it's going to be Realty Income.
So,
And
like I
I think
said,
it
every single American guest I've had has held. I can't think of one American guest I've had so far, and we're up to, I think, you might be guest number 25 in just over 2 months,
Yeah.
And I don't know the breakdown if half of my guests have been American and half Canadian, but I can't think of a single American guest on this, uh, on this show that hasn't held O. So that alone tells me, okay, if that many people are investing their hard-earned money into that company, it's like, okay, that's probably a pretty good sign. Well, that definitely is a good sign, right?
Mm. Yeah, I mean the money definitely seems to flow into Realty Income. I have a couple other REITs in my portfolio too. I have WP Carey, which I almost thought about selling out of, decided to hold on to it. Then I also have another one which I added maybe 3-ish months ago now. Kilroy Realty Investment Corporation, or some KRC is the ticker symbol. It's Kilroy Realty. But that real estate investment trust has a portfolio of office REITs, which right now, just with the last few years, with the last couple of years, definitely with the rise of work from home, office properties have fallen out of favor. So I was able to get this stock at a pretty nice discount. But I feel good about holding it because, even though office REITs are not everyone's, favorite type of real estate asset right now, their properties seem to be one of ones. And a lot of their clientele, well, actually taking a step back, a lot of their portfolio is in areas like Seattle, Washington, the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, San Diego. And so a lot of their tenants are big tech companies, and a lot of the big tech companies have started moving out of Silicon Valley into other markets like Austin, Texas. And so when these tech companies moved to Austin, Texas, who were tenants of Kilroy, they basically said to him, "Hey, we want to still rent from you guys. We still want to be in your buildings, just because, like I said, they're one of one. They're very unique properties that have a lot to offer, I guess, for their tenants." And so they said, if you move out, to the Austin market, we would definitely love to, be situated with you guys over there too. They just wanted to stay with that company. And so that's what they did. They ended up moving out to Austin, which I think indicates that their buildings are in high demand, even though office REITs are out of favor. There seems to be something special about their particular properties. And furthermore, sorry, I'm going on kind of a tangent here about
That's okay.
KRC, but I do think this stock deserves some more recognition. If you look at the financials too, they're growing in rental revenue very steadily across the last 10 years and then some. Even during like the great financial crisis, 2008, 2009, they held pretty well. If you look at the bottom line, the adjusted funds from operation, which is what they use to pay the dividend, right? Like normal businesses like Procter and Gamble or Coca-Cola, they'll use their free cash flow. REITs will use their funds from operation, their adjusted funds from operation. Same thing, increasing over time, like without skipping a beat. And so to me, that indicates a pretty financially sound company. And I know they keep the balance sheet, they run it pretty conservatively. So I felt pretty good about investing in it and getting it at a nice discount. Tangent over. Sorry, Dave.
Okay, yeah, no, all good. I have a couple points to add there. I think, investing in office space during the middle of the pandemic was a great time to, again, dollar cost average down, buy low, because we do see a lot of companies now, forcing their workforce back into the office. You've seen, probably, I know you're still new to Twitter, but you've probably seen tweets from Elon Musk about he wants his workforce in the office. He doesn't want people working from home because working from home, there's obviously way less accountability right? Like, during the midst of the pandemic, when people said they were working from home, I was like, oh, that means you're taking the dog for a walk, right? Like,
Yeah. And speaking
because
from
you could be doing
experience,
anything all day.
yeah. And speaking from experience, it definitely has an impact, I think, on your performance and your focus at your job. And furthermore, there's something irreplaceable about just being in a room working amongst people in real life, like physically being present. There's just a different energy that you don't get as much if it's work from home, just doing all your meetings and all your different things through Zoom. So it's different, and I think a lot of these employers have taken notice of that productivity declining. Um, over the last couple of years because of that. And so I think worst case scenario, like from what I've read so far, and we'll see how it plays out, but it seems like worst case scenario, most companies who were heavy in the work from home and are now wanting to bring their employers back or employees back, they'll have some sort of hybrid approach where maybe a couple days it's work from home, a couple days in the
Yeah.
office, and they'll kind of do that. But even with that, that's still that still means that there's going to be a demand for this office space. And so there's a lot of people I think who say offices are done, they're dead. I just don't think it's going to be true. I just don't think it's
Yeah,
true.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Because even if those people are only in the office 2 or 3 days a week, well, you're still paying rent on that office space or leasing that office space for the full month, right? Whether that person is there 4 days a month or 20 days a month, right? So,
Yeah. So what are
I agree with you 100%.
what are your REITs look like? How many do you have in your portfolio, and which kind do you tend to gravitate towards?
So the short answer is how many is too many. But with that said, I've looked at my just at my REITs alone, and I have like a diversification just within my REITs. I have uh, a very popular one here in Canada is called RioCan. They have massive retail complexes. I've mentioned before they're like the size of 3, maybe 4 football fields where they have retail stores, movie theaters, restaurants.
Wow.
The one location I'm most familiar with has a Home Depot as its anchor store, and so that's sort of my retail bricks and mortar REIT. I have one called Northwest Healthcare. They invest in healthcare properties, so like doctors'
Yeah.
offices, medical clinics. I wouldn't
Great.
doubt if they own hospitals as well or the land that hospitals sit on. So that's a little bit of exposure to healthcare as well. I own one that's never talked about called APR Automotive Properties, and they own the land um, that
Like
car
dealerships?
dealerships,
Yeah.
sit on in like Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary. And as you can imagine, you may not know, but the land in Toronto and Vancouver is ridiculously expensive. And you think about the amount of acreage that a car dealership takes up, it's like that's a lot of very valuable land that they have. Um,
Yeah.
I
So
have another one called
if nothing else, their properties are the properties they own are appreciating in value.
yeah, exactly. I was even
Good.
just thinking this, like I said, I was taking the dog out before we started recording, and outside, I was thinking about them in particular. It's like, well, if one of those car dealerships like goes bankrupt and they have to sell the land, well, selling that land, they're going to sell to a developer that wants to build expensive condos or whatever on it, and they're going to sell like in Toronto and Vancouver, they're just going to sell it at an extreme premium, right? So I think they're in a really good position there. Like I said, I have too many REITs to even remember them all. I literally would have to go through my phone and say, "Okay, this one, this one, this one." But yeah,
That's
those are
okay.
kind of the top 3 that I always think about.
Yeah. That's awesome. What's so it just in terms of like Canadian stocks versus US stocks, what's kind of that blend look like? I think you said you're mostly in Canadian stocks, right?
Yeah, so I'm actually 100% in the Canadian market right now, and the reason
Uh,
being is the exchange rate is not, favorable to me at all. So, and I've said this to many other American guests, is like if the Canadian dollar were to increase in value against the US dollar, then I would definitely look at there's so many great US companies that I would love to have a position in, right? Like you mentioned Procter and Gamble and you mentioned Coca-Cola. Those are just, 2 right, there's hundreds more obviously. And
mhm.
so yeah, I have nothing against, US companies in the US market. I would definitely love to get into it more, but it's just the exchange rate right now is like 70 cents on the dollar doesn't look attractive to me, right? Like I have to pay a dollar 30 or a dollar 34 for every US dollar. It's like, I'd rather just pay a dollar to dollar for Canadian stocks right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I just, down here in the United States, one of the most popular comments I get, one of the most frequent things people say is you need to look at the Canadian banks. You need to make a video. You need to do something regarding the Canadian banks. And I'm like, okay, like enough people have said it that it's like there's got to be something special about these Canadian banks, but I haven't looked deep enough to know what it is. So what is it about the Canadian banks? And I think it was it Dividend John that was recently on that was talking about he was a big fan of Canadian banks, right? I think he had a
Yep.
handful of them for sure. But was like, what is it about these guys that make them so superior?
Well, first, I'm glad you asked because that was one of the next things on my list to talk about was like banking in the financial sector. And my question to you was going to be, what do you know about the Canadian banks? Which you've already answered is you haven't had
Not much.
time to really. look into them yet. So basically, there's big. We call them the Big Five, which is Royal Bank, CIBC, which is the Imperial Bank of Commerce, BMO, which is Bank of Montreal, TD, which is Toronto Dominion, and BNS, Bank of Nova Scotia. And then you can add the sixth one, which is National Bank. So I guess first comment to answer your question is, what other sector does all five or six announce $1.2 billion in profits every quarter? Yeah, I said
Okay.
that right. $1.2 billion in profits every quarter, right? Maybe
Yeah.
1.1, maybe 1.3, but it seems the average is $1.2 billion in profit every single quarter. So right there, they're making money hand over fist, right? So that's probably the number one thing that a lot of people look at, is just how much money they're making every quarter, every year. And then I guess one of the other things, there was a tweet from, you may not have come across this yet, but his handle is at Settling Nomads, and I'm not sure where he's from, but he's an immigrant to Canada. But he's got some great tweets, and one of them was, he had a table of how long the Canadian banks had been paying dividends for, and I think it's Bank of Nova Scotia that was the first one paying a dividend since 1829. So they're coming up on a 200-year anniversary in, well, just 6 years. We're almost to 2023.
Dang.
I think Bank of Montreal was 1831, so they're also coming up on a 200-year anniversary. And basically, all five of them have been paying dividends for well over 150 years. And obviously, there's been dividend growth in that time as well. So, you know, stability of long-term and dividend payments, stability of extremely long-term dividend growth, right?
Yeah.
You definitely need to look into them more. And yeah, you would love making a video about them. Just what you learn and the research that you do on them. Yeah, it would be a banger video for you. I can almost guarantee it.
Okay. It's definitely on my to-do list. I just need to commit to sitting down and
Mhm.
to look more into them. But that all sounds really good. And I mean, comparing that to some of the US banks here, like JP Morgan or, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, or some of the bigger ones, right? Um,
Yeah,
I know in the past, like when we went through the great financial crisis, there, a lot of those banks were more, I guess, risky than they are today, just because of how they were issuing loans. And that's what caused 2008, 2009, just like very low requirements to get a loan or to get a mortgage, whatever. But
yeah,
contrast that to today, like to get a loan, it's you have to, there's much higher requisites. So I guess they're not being as risky with who they're lending money out to. But at the same time, from my understanding, since all of that, they're now required to like keep a certain amount in the bank to make sure that that never happens again. And if you look at the balance sheet on a lot of these banks too, like if you look at Bank of America, if you look at JP Morgan, they have no debt. They're negative debt, negative net debt by a long shot. And so I even look at those, which I'm sure the Canadian banks are the same way. But I look at those and I think, that sounds pretty good to me too. I just at least seeing
yeah.
negative debt, growing book value per share on an annual basis. It's like for a bank that I'd feel pretty good about investing in something like that. And just kind of a sidebar, I don't have any banks in my portfolio. I'm really interesting. The only financial stocks I have, and I want to know if you know about these, Dave, are business development companies. Are you familiar with those?
What are the like what companies exactly are you talking about? I'm not
So,
sure
like
if I
Main
do.
Street Capital Corporation, have you heard of them?
Only from watching your video this morning.
Okay, yeah, like Main Street Capital Corporation, there's Ares Capital Corporation, there's Owl Rock Capital Corporation. Those are some of the bigger ones. But essentially, what these business development companies do is they will loan money out and also invest in what they call like middle market companies, which are like smaller companies that are maybe doing somewhere between like maybe five on the low end, 10 on the high end, $5 to $10 million in revenue. I might have those numbers a bit wrong, but not super small businesses, but also not super big businesses, somewhere in between. And they'll loan money out to them
Right.
who maybe they're in distress and need some financing to get back on their feet, or maybe they're looking to, expand operations. They'll either loan money out to them or take equity stakes in
Expand
them.
something.
Yeah, and give them the capital to expand and better their business. And then, very similar to REITs, they will, pass 90%. They have to pass 90% of their income to us as shareholders. So it's very similar in that regard. But interestingly enough, the only financial companies that I have in my portfolio are those business development companies. I just have a couple of them, and they're all high yielders too. Like, because they have to, pass so much of their income up to shareholders, they're definitely high yielders. But I do need to probably better diversify in that sector and add some sort of bank, or maybe a couple banks. But I just haven't found the right one. But who knows? Maybe it could be a Canadian one after this conversation.
And, and as previously mentioned, you can find Ryan on YouTube. Over 14,000 subscribers. Just type Ryan Williams into the YouTube search bar and he will come up. So yeah, definitely big shout out there to your YouTube channel and your whole YouTube community. Great videos. Like I said, I was watching several of them this morning. I guess anything you want to add about YouTube or any of your other social medias?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely most active on YouTube. So, most of my stuff goes out there. I just started on Twitter within the last week. So, I'm sending out a couple tweets a day, every other day or so. And I am on Instagram as well, but nothing interesting going on over there. If you guys want to catch up with me, definitely YouTube, Twitter, and I also have a free weekly newsletter that I put out, which you can sign up for at retirewithryan.com. But those are my three main spots.
Yeah, I think if you give me a second here, I can show the newsletter as well. Which, yeah, like you said, retirewithryan.com. So your weekly dose of dividends. A shout out to your newsletter as well.
Thank you.
Cool, cool. Yeah, I definitely wanted to get that in there for you. So, yeah, this has been awesome. I see we've already been talking for well over 40 minutes. We have had a little bit of issues, and I'll do my best to. I'm not the best at editing, but I'll figure out what I can do to piece this together so we can get a decent episode of the Passive Income Podcast out there. Another sector that we haven't talked about yet, well, we did mention Procter and Gamble and Coca-Cola, but consumer staples. And as you know, I was at Walmart this morning. 8:30 on a Sunday morning is when I like to go, and I was like, "Geez, it's still busy here." Like maybe it's because
Yeah.
it's the weekend, like 1 week before Christmas, but still, I was
Yeah,
like, I can't believe how many people are at Walmart at 8:30 on a Sunday morning.
coincidentally, I was there this morning too. There's a Walmart and a Lowe's, which is, I'm a shareholder of Lowe's, right around the corner from where I live. So I was there at Walmart right at opening, 6 a.m. this morning, and few people tooting around there. Nothing too crazy, but you can always count on there at least being a few shoppers in Walmart. But yeah, the consumer staples sector as a whole, I've got to say, is one of my favorites. When I first got into investing, I definitely gravitated most towards that sector, just because it is more stable. It can be more reliable than some other sectors out there. So I think for any long-term dividend investor, it makes sense to use consumer staples as a sort of foundation for your portfolio if you're going to go the individual stock route.
Yeah, I would agree with that. People have to eat every single day, and you have your Coca-Colas, your Pepsis, your Costco's, as mentioned, your Walmarts, and you know that those companies are making huge sales every day. Obviously Pepsi has not just the beverage, but so many snacks in their different divisions as well. And yeah, consumer staples are. I hate the term no brainer, but I tend to say it too much. It's like it's a no brainer, right?
No, it is. I mean, we referenced Procter and Gamble earlier in the video, but you think about a company like that, shampoo, dish soap, toothpaste, deodorant, paper towels, I think. No, maybe that's Kimberly Clark, but
Yeah.
you get the gist. Like, things that are, laundry detergent, that's another big one. Things you use every single day and most often times probably don't even think about. But if you look at your toothpaste, if you look at your dish soap, if you look at your laundry detergent, at least here in the United States. Like there's a good chance you're using
Yeah.
something from Procter and Gamble.
Same here. Same here. You go into your bathroom or your laundry room and you just turn the bottle around or turn your tube of toothpaste around and you're going to see that P&G logo guaranteed without you even knowing that you have P&G in your house. It's there. It's there, right? So,
Yeah.
it's a household staple. Everybody has it whether they even know it or not. So, yeah. And I guess I know there's actually a Procter and Gamble plant just around the corner from where I work. I work in an industrial park in the city, so there's actually a Kellogg's there as well, and several other plants. So yeah, they're everywhere.
Yeah, the thing about consumer staples like Procter and Gamble, even Walmart too, is it's rare to find them at a super deep value. So if once if you're going to buy it, if you're going to add to your position, chances are you're not going to get it at a super steep discount, which is fine. Like that just seems to come with the territory with companies like that. But depending on how much your individual position has appreciated, it shouldn't always. I don't think it should always keep you from adding more shares. I just actually bought more bought more Procter and Gamble a couple weeks ago, and I think now it's become either my second or third biggest position, which is something I've been working towards for a while now. So I'm definitely glad to see it getting up there.
Yeah, nice. That's good. Yeah, cool, cool. Sort of what I've done a little bit differently with my consumer staples. Again, all Canadian markets. So I have one that's called Pizza Pizza, and they're a restaurant chain, just like you're a Pizza Hut or Domino's. And so yeah, that's one of mine where it's like, yeah, people are going to eat pizza, whether people are going to eat pizza, guaranteed. Another one I
Mhm.
have is called Roger Sugar, and sugar goes into everything, so I feel pretty good about owning a sugar company. And I have another one that owns, again, sort of in the restaurant chain. They have some different chain restaurants within their portfolio, uh, chains that are in Toronto and other large urban centers. So I feel pretty good about that one as well. Yeah, I guess I'm just playing the consumer staples a little bit differently, I guess, but I still see those as those consumer staples, right? Like people are still going to eat whether they're buying groceries from Walmart and Costco or whether they're going and grabbing a slice of pizza or a
Is
burger or whatever they're, right?
is Tim Hortons publicly traded?
Yes.
It is.
So they are owned by a company called RBI, which is Restaurant Brands International. And
Oh yeah,
Restaurant
like
Brands International
yeah.
they hold Tim
Sorry.
Hortons and Burger King.
Okay.
Yeah, so Tim Hortons, and they have others in their portfolio as well, but obviously Tim Hortons and Burger King are the two main big ones. So it's not like I know with Starbucks you can buy directly Starbucks, but with RBI you're buying sort of this ecosystem, right? Of the Timmys, the BKs, and whatever other chains they have within their, like I said, ecosystem.
Yeah. I ask, so I'm a big Starbucks guy. Love the coffee. I don't go there all the time and spend money there, but I love drinking the coffee, what I do. And it's my largest position. It's the biggest position in my portfolio. And so naturally I was curious about Tim Hortons because I know that's like the coffee spot up in Canada. So I had to ask.
Yeah, it definitely is, and they've also expanded into several U.S. states and also internationally. I know they're expanding into the UK. I believe India. I'm not even sure what other countries they're expanding into. I wouldn't doubt it if they've looked at Australia, if they're not into Australia by now. And I'd have to really look into it to see where else they've um, expanded into. But yeah, RBI is one of those ones that to look into as well, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I had a few people talk about that one here, just in my comment section. And when you said RBI, it instantly like rang a bell. So, like you said, Burger King, they own Tim Hortons. I could have this wrong, but there's a pizza joint in there somewhere, I think. Like maybe like Pizza Hut or something along those lines. I need to look that up, but I've definitely heard of that company before. Taco Bell, maybe it was
Yeah,
Taco Bell.
I'm honestly not sure if they have
I don't
Pizza
know.
Hut. Sorry, say again.
It might have been Taco Bell, what I was thinking.
I think Taco Bell isn't that under the PepsiCo umbrella?
Oh, I was definitely wrong. Okay, I had to look it up, Dave. So Burger King, Tim Hortons, Popeyes. Do you know Popeyes?
Yeah, Popeye's chicken.
Yeah, and then Firehouse Subs, which I've seen pop up definitely more in the last decade or so. But okay, yeah,
Right.
four pretty strong restaurant chains.
Yeah, definitely.
But you're right, like just kind of overall, companies like this are always good ones to have in your portfolio. The old reliables, as I like to call them, ones you don't have to worry about, you know.
Yeah. I like, yeah, exactly. And that's sort of what I think we all look for in the dividend investing stratosphere in the realm is to those ones you don't have to worry about, right? Like the Canadian banks, you don't have to worry about them. Like these other consumer staples, you don't have to worry about. You sleep easy at night. You know that every month or every quarter those dividends are just going to keep rolling in. You're hoping for a, maybe an annual dividend raise. You're hoping that they become dividend aristocrats or dividend kings, and obviously, and then we all just pray for no dividend cuts, right?
Yeah.
Which obviously can happen, but
So on the topic of Canadian banks again, if I know you mentioned the big five, but if you had to pick one, like just one to start looking into, maybe your top dog out of the big five, which one would you say is the one to look at?
yeah, that's an impossible question to answer because everybody will answer that differently. um, I guess the reason I've started a position in Bank of Nova Scotia is simply because they hold the mortgage on my house. So that seems to me a good place to start. I want to turn that cash register around, get them to start paying me to pay them. Um, Royal Bank is probably, well, I think it is the number one out of the top five, and so that's another great one to look at. Um, it's really hard to just pick one of them. It really is nearly impossible, right? So if you're looking, I guess maybe those are the two to start with, and those are just my personal opinions because, like I said, I just happen to have my mortgages held by Bank of Nova Scotia, and Royal Bank, I believe, is number one overall. So those that might be your starting points. But you can't go wrong
Okay.
looking into Bank of Montreal, TD, and CIBC, and National Bank as well. All six of them, to be quite honest.
So those first two, it's BNS is one of the ticker symbols, and then RBC, is that the other one?
Yeah,
Okay, good to know.
the ticker symbol is actually RY, like for Royal
Hmm.
RY.
Okay. Okay. Good to know.
And I'm quite sure that, like, obviously they're all traded on the TSX, the Toronto Stock Exchange, but I'm quite sure they're all on the New York Stock Exchange as well. I would bet dollars to
Yeah,
donuts that they are. I
I
haven't
bel
looked, but I'm quite sure that they all are.
I believe you're right. Yeah, I believe you're right on that. Mhm. Like, I
So
don't
I
think it's
think
very hard for us to buy them here.
so I think we're all looking forward to the Canadian Banks video coming up on the Ryan Williams YouTube channel.
Yeah, maybe next month, maybe February. It'll happen at some point.
Awesome, awesome. Um, I don't know. We've talked about a lot. There's a few sectors we haven't talked about. Anything else you'd like to touch on before we sign off?
Um,
Technology, Apple, Tesla,
no, we don't have to talk
healthcare,
about we don't have to talk
energy.
about Tesla.
I
Do you have
think it's
Tesla?
talked about enough.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
gets
own
talked about
Tesla,
enough.
no.
I don't either. I don't either. Strictly
Yeah.
dividends. And actually, there are certain stocks out there. You might feel the same way. There are certain stocks out there that don't pay a dividend that are still very tempting. Like for me, Google, very tempting. Obviously, good company. Amazon, you know, but still, it's like I can't get past
Yeah.
the non dividend thing. I think they're good companies, but I got to stay true. You got to stay true to your strategy, and know that if you're investing for cash flow, even though there's some other good companies out there, I do think it takes away from the main objective, which you one best not do. I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just, stick to that dividend strategy. Just keep buying companies that are literally paying you to not work for them. That's one of my favorite sayings is like, I love when companies pay me to not work for them. And,
Yeah.
that's with that said, I do have some growth stocks. I actually, it's a small like lithium speculation company, and the reason I got into that, and it's a very small position, like 10 or 15 shares, and the only reason I got into that is because like, well, it's going to take a lot of lithium mining to make all of these uh, electric vehicle batteries, right? So I was like, well, we'll see where it goes. And yeah, even on, like I said, it's only 10 or so shares, but I've done okay on it. It's doubled or tripled, and it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to hold it and see where it goes. Maybe they get scooped up by a bigger player, and who knows, right? Like, it's not a huge dollar position either at those say 10 shares, and I do have some other growth stocks where you're like just kind of hoping that maybe you can turn a dollar into $10 or something, or turn $10 into 100. But for the most part, yeah, my strategy is dividends, and just watching those dividends roll in every month and every quarter. Very
Yeah,
similar to your strategy, right?
that's what it's all about.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Passive Income Podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. And yeah, definitely give Ryan a follow on Twitter at Retire with Ryan. Definitely check out the YouTube channel, the newsletter, everything. Any last words before we sign off?
No, I mean, thank you everyone for watching. If you're still tuning in with us here, and Dave, thank you so much for having me on. It was a real pleasure being able to meet you and chat with you. Hope to do it again
Yeah,
soon.
awesome. Thank you so much. And if you're still watching this late in the program, you have to subscribe. Those are the rules. I don't make them. You just have to subscribe now. You've been here with us an hour. Just click that subscribe button below and join the Passive Income Posse.
If you don't, we'll find you.
Yeah, sorry. Your audio is cut out a little bit on me. I hopefully we got that on the recording okay, and